Talking about DuckTales today, we're talking about specifically the other bin of Scrooge McDuck, an episode that, that sounds super mysterious and like it's going to advance plot stuff. And oh boy, it did. What a brilliant way to show us the stakes of this ongoing plot point with Lena and Webby. It's just so cleverly done, and they even allude to it in an earlier scene. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it in its entirety here, but because it is very good, and I know some people still haven't watched this show yet, but it was so well handled. There's technically two plots going on in this episode. In fact, they felt very distinct from each other to the point that they could have almost been two half episodes. So I'm going to talk about them separately, but again, I don't want to spoil the other plot either, because it was also very good. And even though the way it was handled was simple, it's still clever enough that I don't want to talk about it in specificity. That other plot is that it opens on a reminder that Louie is a con artist. He's tricking Dewey into doing his laundry for him. But soon it turns out that Huey has brought a Bigfoot into the house, who he has named Tenderfeet, because he seems to be just a big softy, and he'd also gotten a thorn stuck in his foot. That's how they met. And because it's something inspired by the other plot of the episode, Scrooge is searching the house for anything supernatural, so the boys are having to hide their friend Tenderfeet while they take care of him, because he's just a big, simple guy, right? He's basically a giant ape, but he's a sweet guy, too. And he deserves their help. Except that it becomes very obvious very early on that he's scamming them. That he's using this place as shelter, and he is using their sympathies to just take whatever he wants from them. Or at the very least, it seems like that might be the case. And that opening, with that reminder that Louis is very much a con artist type, suggests that he's going to have to outcon this other con artist. And of course, that ends up being the case, because Tenderfeet is actually just some dude bro named Gavin, who is actively conning these guys. And he knows this, it was all premeditated. And in the end, Louis is able to con him to the point that he gets kicked out of the house, while also conning his brothers and Uncle Scrooge into remaining sympathetic towards Tenderfeet, while also thinking that Louis himself is a good person trying to do his best for the target of his con. It's brilliant. It shows just how smart this character is in his own unique way, because he defeats this other guy who is pretty good at the thing that he does by just being himself and doing that thing better. This is the plot line where most of the comedy of the episode is derived from, and I found it to be one of the most entertaining comedy through plots of this entire show so far. Even though I didn't particularly like the character of Gavin, I didn't think he was particularly interesting. And it's rare that a comedy plot can sell itself to me when I just don't like one of the involved characters, even just as a character. By far the meatier of the two plots in this episode, though, is Lena and Webby's plot. The episode actually opens on Lena trying to use a diamond dagger that can cut through anything to cut through the special, what would be called string? It's still technically string, right? That holds the pendant where Scrooge keeps his number one dime. Because the number one dime is the object of interest for the shadow being latched onto Lena, that being her aunt Magica. And we get a lot of Magica in this episode. We really get a feel for her character and how manipulative and how much of a user she is. She's extremely selfish, and while she is willing to wield her familial relationship with Lena against her, she's also willing to wield literally anything else she can against Lena to get Lena to do what she wants. And when Webby catches Lena in Scrooge's room, Webby wonders what her friend is doing there. So to keep her con going, Lena pretends that she's become obsessed with Scrooge and his exploits just like Webby has. And so Webby goes through this long presentation of Scrooge's history with her, thinking that she's sharing her special interest with someone who also shares her special interest. And this is where we get the foreshadow of how the ending is done. It's very good. I want you guys to watch for it. If you haven't seen the episode, I want you to watch for it when you are watching the episode, because it's just there. It's just casually mentioned. It's just very good. While this is happening, Magica in her shadow form is stretching out throughout the rest of the manor as much as she can, and happens to overhear a reference to the other bin. Not the money bin, but something else, where Scrooge is going to keep the dime until he feels like he's dealt with whichever supernatural presence might be trying to get it, because he noticed that Lena was able to partially fray that cord with her dagger before Webby caught her, and nothing should be able to do that. So Scrooge is worried. This brings the other bin to Lena's attention, and she mentions it to Webby and convinces her that this is a place that Webby will want to go because she is so interested in Scrooge and what he does, because the other bin is where he keeps all of the most dangerous things from his adventures that he's trying to keep out of the hands of others. And there's this cool, brief little treasure hunt thing that they have to do to get in, that while it was pretty quick and rapid fire, was still cleverly done and just extremely well presented. Like, it looked good. The whole sequence looked really good. And then they're in and they're trying to decipher the code to allow them to find where the number 1 dime is kept. And throughout the entire thing, Magica is whispering in Lena's ear, trying to get her to betray Webby and leave her behind and do this herself faster, basically brute force her way through this, instead of trying to tackle it intelligently, because there's an eclipse coming, and Magica needs the dime before the eclipse. We don't specifically know why, except that it'll somehow increase her power. But that is her goal. It's very concretely given to us here. But when it seems that they find the dime and Magica grabs it, seizing full control of Lena, and then kind of peeling herself off of her and regaining something akin to her full power, the entire tone of the episode changes. It seemed like up to that point, it was going to be one of those things where the not bad guy has to make a choice, or at the very least, set the foundation for the choice they're going to make to not be a bad guy later on. But then everything just goes to disaster. Magic is able to turn Webby into a little doll. That's a reference to her original design in the original show, by the way, which I thought was cute. And then use the magic defenses that Lena bears to destroy Webby as a way of punishing Lena for her supposed betrayal. And she's just so cruel about it. She's just so disgustingly cruel. And horrifying, and powerful, and dangerous. It's terrifying. And it's such a radical shift in tone that it makes sense that it turns out to all be a dream, put in motion by one of the elements down there in the other bin with all this other stuff. It didn't really happen, but now Lena has seen what will happen if she continues to help her aunt. And so she has a reason to go against her. And when Scrooge catches them, thinking that they were just fangirling over his exploits, because that's the thing that Webby does, Lena tries to just straight up tell him who her aunt is, because she's seen now what all he's accomplished in his monster hunting, and thinks that maybe he can help. But it turns out the eclipse is close enough, and Magica's power has grown enough that she can just control Webby's body now. A thing that we saw in that dream sequence. So it was properly foreshadowed too. So even though prior to Scrooge showing up, Lena convinced Webby that they should stop looking and they should get out of here, putting an end to this specific manipulation, now Magica can just do it herself. So even though Lena made the right choice, it ended up not really mattering. I imagine it'll also help down the line that Lena did make the right choice prior to control of her body being taken, but we'll have to wait and see that. It's just a very exciting episode that has an it was all a dream ending, technically speaking, and yet it works because all of the elements were properly set up. Again, I want you to keep your eye open, or your ears open, technically, during that presentation that Webby's giving, because it just makes sense. If you keep that in mind, it just makes sense. And I particularly liked that even though the two plots in this episode were mostly unconnected, the fact that Lena trying to get the dime tipped Scrooge off to a supernatural element, which led to some of the stuff in the Gavin plot, was really the only connective tissue here. Even though they were mostly unconnected, I still like that they were basically resolved in the same way. Louis out-conned another con man by just being who he is, being good at being a con man. And Webby technically defeated Lena and Magica, at least to a limited capacity, by being who she is, just being a good person who's a friend to Lena. It's a very minor observation in this otherwise really cool lore-furthering episode. But, I mean, I figured it was an observation worth making, right? This episode clearly exists primarily to get you hyped for the Lena and Magica stuff going forward, and man, did it do that. I'm super hyped. I'm really looking forward to what comes next. As per usual, though, guys, what did you think of the DuckTales episode, The Other Bin of Scrooge McDuck? If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. So check out links to my various social medias as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.